What if I told you there's a type of person who can disappear from your life without warning after years of friendship, yet somehow still knows exactly what birthday gift will make you cry happy tears? Someone who'll sit quietly in meetings for months, then suddenly present an idea so brilliant it changes your entire company's direction? Someone who seems to live in the future while everyone else is stuck in the present? Here's the wild part. These people aren't fictional characters or rare geniuses. They're walking among us right now, making up less than 2% of the population, operating by rules that nobody else seems to understand. They're called INFJs, and they're literally the human equivalent of spotting a unicorn. If unicorns could predict your breakup 3 months before it happens and then vanish into thin air when you need them most. Today, we're cracking the code on psychology's most enigmatic personality type, the ones I call the black swans of human behavior. Fair warning, once you understand how INFJs really work, you'll start seeing them everywhere, and trust me, you'll never look at human unpredictability the same way again. 1. What makes someone a black swan personality? Before we jump into the INFJ rabbit hole, let's talk about what we mean by black swan. The term comes from Nassim Taleb's groundbreaking work, describing events that are extremely rare, unpredictable, and have massive impact. For centuries, people believed all swans were white, until explorers discovered black swans in Australia, completely shattering that assumption. INFJs are the human equivalent of those black swans. They're rare, they defy expectations, and once you truly understand them, they'll change your entire perspective on human nature. These folks don't fit into neat little boxes, and that's exactly what makes them so powerful. Think about it, most personality types follow somewhat predictable patterns. You can usually guess how an extroverted type might react in social situations, or how a thinking type might approach problem solving. But INFJs? They'll surprise you every single time. They're the friends who seem quiet and reserved, then suddenly deliver the most profound insights that leave you speechless. They're the colleagues who appear to go with the flow, then completely revolutionize your entire project with one brilliant idea. What's really fascinating is that INFJs themselves often don't realize they're being unpredictable. To them, their behavior makes perfect sense. It's everyone else who seems confusing. This creates a unique dynamic where INFJs are constantly surprising others while feeling surprised by others' reactions to them. 2. The rarity factor. Why INFJs are so uncommon. Let's get real about numbers for a second. INFJs represent somewhere between 1 to 3% of the population, depending on which study you're looking at. That means in a room of 100 people, you might find 1 or 2 INFJs, maybe. To put this in perspective, you're more likely to have perfect pitch or be left-handed than to be an INFJ. But here's where it gets interesting. This rarity isn't just statistical coincidence. The combination of traits that makes someone an INFJ is genuinely unusual in human evolution. Think about it. Being introverted yet people-focused, intuitive yet practical, feeling-oriented yet structured. These seemingly contradictory traits don't typically cluster together, which is exactly why INFJs are so rare. This rarity creates what psychologists call the lone wolf syndrome in many INFJs. They often grow up feeling different, misunderstood, or like they don't quite fit anywhere. Unlike more common personality types who can easily find others like themselves, INFJs often spend years thinking they're the only ones who see the world the way they do. The scarcity also means that most people go through life without really understanding INFJs. They might encounter them occasionally, feel that strange sense of being truly seen by them, but then struggle to categorize or predict them. It's like trying to understand the ocean by looking at a single wave. You get a glimpse of something profound, but the full picture remains elusive. 3. The Introverted Intuition dominant function, their hidden superpower. Now we're getting to the meat of what makes INFJs so unpredictable, their dominant cognitive function called Introverted Intuition, or NI for short. If you're not familiar with cognitive functions, think of them as the mental software that runs in the background of your mind, processing information and making decisions. Introverted intuition is like having a supercomputer that's constantly running pattern recognition in the background. INFJs are unconsciously collecting massive amounts of information: body language, tone of voice, environmental details, historical patterns, and their NI is synthesizing all of this into sudden flashes of insight. Here's where it gets wild. This process is almost entirely unconscious. An INFJ might suddenly know that their friend is going through a rough patch, or that a business decision is going to backfire, without being able to explain exactly how they know. They just do. It's like their brain is constantly solving puzzles they didn't even realize they were working on. This creates what I call the oracle effect. INFJs will make statements or predictions that seem to come out of nowhere, but then turn out to be eerily accurate. They might casually mention that they think a coworker is planning to quit, or that a relationship isn't going to work out, and everyone around them wonders how the heck they could possibly know that. The unpredictable part comes from the fact that you never know when these insights are going to hit. An INFJ might be perfectly content having a normal conversation about the weather, and then suddenly drops some profound observation about human nature that leaves everyone stunned. It's like they're walking around with a direct line to some cosmic database of human behavior. 4. The Chameleon Effect. How INFJs adapt to any environment. One of the most mind-bending aspects of INFJ behavior is their ability to completely shift their presentation depending on their environment. I call this the chameleon effect, and it's probably the single biggest reason why INFJs are so hard to pin down. Picture this. You meet an INFJ at a professional networking event, and they come across as confident, articulate, and socially smooth. Then you run into them at a bookstore the next week, and they seem completely different, quiet, contemplative, almost shy. Which one is the real them? Plot twist, they both are. INFJs have this incredible ability to read the emotional and social temperature of any situation and adjust accordingly. It's not that they're being fake or manipulative, they're genuinely responding to what they sense the environment needs from them. If they're in a high-energy sales meeting, they can tap into that energy. If they're at a funeral, they naturally shift into a more somber, supportive mode. This adaptability extends to their interests and opinions too. An INFJ might be passionate about environmental issues when talking to an activist friend, deeply engaged in philosophical discussions with an academic colleague, and completely absorbed in pop culture analysis with their younger sibling. Again, none of these versions are fake. They're all genuine facets of their multidimensional personality. The problem is that this chameleon-like behavior makes INFJs incredibly difficult to categorize or predict. Just when you think you've figured them out, they'll show up in a completely different mode, leaving you wondering if you ever really knew them at all. It's like trying to photograph a kaleidoscope. Every angle reveals a different pattern. 5. The paradox of deep empathy versus emotional distance. Here's where INFJs really mess with people's heads. They can be simultaneously the most empathetic person you've ever met and the most emotionally elusive. It's like they have this incredible ability to tune into your feelings and understand exactly what you're going through, but then they'll suddenly seem distant or detached, leaving you wondering what happened. This paradox stems from how INFJs process emotions. Their secondary function, extrovert feeling, FE, makes them incredibly attuned to other people's emotional states. They can walk into a room and immediately sense the tension between two coworkers, or know exactly what to say to comfort a friend who's having a rough day. They're like emotional barometers, constantly picking up on the feelings swirling around them. But here's the catch, all that emotional absorption can be overwhelming. INFJs often need to create distance to protect themselves from emotional overload. They might be incredibly present and supportive during a crisis, then seemingly disappear for a few days to recharge. This isn't because they don't care. It's because they care so much that they need time to process all the emotions they've absorbed. This creates a confusing dynamic for the people in their lives. You might feel incredibly close to an INFJ during deep conversations, feeling like they truly understand you in a way that nobody else does. But then they might not text you back for a week, leaving you wondering if you did something wrong. The truth is, they're probably off somewhere processing not just their own emotions, but pieces of yours too. 6. The all-or-nothing approach to relationships. When it comes to relationships, INFJs don't do anything halfway, and this creates some seriously unpredictable patterns. They're either all in or they're out, with very little middle ground. This intensity can be both incredibly rewarding and completely bewildering for the people in their lives. In the early stages of any relationship, romantic, friendship, or professional, INFJs are often cautious observers. They're taking in massive amounts of information, trying to determine if this person aligns with their values and vision for the future. During this phase, they might seem pleasant but somewhat distant, giving very little indication of their true thoughts or feelings. But once an INFJ decides you're their person, everything changes. Suddenly, you have access to their rich inner world, their deepest thoughts, their wildest dreams. They'll remember tiny details about conversations you had months ago, anticipate your needs before you express them, and offer support that's so perfectly tailored to your situation that it feels almost magical. The flip side is that INFJs can also write people off completely, often for reasons that aren't immediately obvious to others. They might end a friendship or relationship that seemed perfectly fine from the outside, leaving everyone wondering what went wrong. Usually, it's because the INFJ sensed some fundamental incompatibility or value conflict that others missed. This all-or-nothing approach extends to how they show up in relationships too. INFJs don't really do casual friendships or surface-level connections. They want depth, meaning, and authentic connection, or they'd rather be alone. This can make them seem unpredictable to people who are used to more conventional relationship patterns. 7. The creative explosion versus perfectionist paralysis cycle. One of the most fascinating and unpredictable aspects of INFJ behavior is how they cycle between periods of incredible creative output and complete creative paralysis. Understanding this pattern is key to understanding why INFJs can seem so inconsistent in their productivity and follow-through. During their creative explosion phases, INFJs are unstoppable. They'll work for hours on end, completely absorbed in their projects, producing work that's often surprisingly innovative and deeply meaningful. They might write an entire novel in a month, completely redesign a business process, or create art that captures something profound about the human experience. During these periods, they seem almost superhuman in their focus and output. But then, seemingly without warning, they'll hit a wall. The perfectionist paralysis kicks in, and suddenly they can't make progress on anything. They'll second-guess every decision, obsess over minor details, and often abandon projects entirely because they don't meet their impossibly high standards. This phase can last days, weeks, or even months. What makes this cycle so unpredictable is that it's not tied to external factors in obvious ways. An INFJ might have a creative breakthrough in the middle of their most stressful life period, or hit paralysis when everything seems to be going perfectly. The cycle seems to follow its own internal logic that's invisible to outside observers. This pattern can be incredibly frustrating for colleagues, friends, and family members who are trying to understand or support the INFJ. One day they're collaborating with someone who seems to have unlimited creative energy and brilliant ideas, and the next day that same person is questioning everything and can't seem to make the simplest decisions. 8. The door slam phenomenon, when INFJs cut you off completely. Perhaps no INFJ behavior is more shocking and unpredictable than what's commonly known as the door slam. This is when an INFJ completely cuts someone out of their life, often with little or no explanation, leaving the other person completely bewildered about what happened. From the outside, the door slam can seem to come out of nowhere. The INFJ might have seemed perfectly fine in the relationship, never expressing any major complaints or concerns. Then suddenly, they stop responding to calls and texts, avoid social situations where they might encounter the person, and essentially act as if that person no longer exists. But here's what's really happening. The door slam is actually the end result of a long internal process that's been invisible to everyone else. INFJs typically give people many chances before they reach their breaking point. They'll overlook boundary violations, excuse hurtful behavior, and try to see the best in people long past the point where other personality types would have spoken up or walked away. The problem is that INFJs often don't communicate these internal struggles. They might hint at their concerns or try to address issues indirectly, but they rarely have the direct confrontations that would make their growing frustration obvious to others. So while they're internally reaching their limit, the other person might have no idea that anything's wrong. When the door finally slams, it's usually because the INFJ has concluded that the relationship is fundamentally incompatible with their values or well-being, and that no amount of communication or effort will change that. At that point, they see continued engagement as pointless and potentially harmful, so they cut off contact completely. 9. The future vision ability that freaks people out. One of the most unnerving things about INFJs is their ability to see patterns and trajectories that others miss completely. They'll make casual comments about how they think situations will unfold, and then those predictions come true with startling accuracy. It's like they have a crystal ball, except their predictions are based on incredibly sophisticated pattern recognition rather than magic. This future vision ability comes from their dominant introverted intuition constantly processing information and extrapolating trends. An INFJ might notice subtle changes in someone's behavior and predict that they're planning to leave their job, or sense underlying tensions in a group and forecast exactly how the conflict will play out. They're not psychic, they're just incredibly good at reading between the lines. The unsettling part is that INFJs often express these insights casually, without realizing how startling they sound to others. They might mention in passing that they think a friend's relationship won't last, or that a company's new strategy is going to backfire, presenting these observations as obvious conclusions when they're actually based on complex intuitive processing that others can't follow. This ability can make people uncomfortable around INFJs, especially when their predictions are negative. Nobody likes being told that their exciting new relationship probably won't work out, even if the INFJ turns out to be right. It can create a dynamic where people seek out INFJs for their insights but then feel uneasy about what they might discover. 10. The helper's paradox, fixing others while struggling themselves. Here's another layer to the INFJ paradox that makes them so unpredictable. They're often incredibly skilled at helping others solve their problems while struggling to address their own issues. They can offer brilliant advice, provide emotional support that feels almost therapeutic, and guide people through complex decisions, but then seem completely lost when it comes to their own lives. This helper's paradox stems from how INFJs process information differently when it comes to their own situations versus other people's situations. When they're helping someone else, they can access their introverted intuition clearly, seeing patterns and solutions with remarkable clarity. But when it comes to their own problems, they often get caught up in emotional complexity and perfectionist paralysis. An INFJ might spend hours helping a friend work through relationship issues, offering insights that are so spot on that the friend feels like they've had a therapy session. But that same INFJ might spend months agonizing over their own relationship decisions, unable to see their situation with the same clarity they brought to their friend's problem. This creates confusing dynamics in their relationships. People often come to rely on INFJs as their go-to advisors and emotional support systems, seeing them as incredibly wise and put together. But then they're surprised to discover that these same people are struggling with anxiety, decision paralysis, or other personal challenges. 11. The information absorption overload. INFJs process information differently than most people, and this creates behavioral patterns that can seem completely random to outside observers. They're constantly absorbing massive amounts of data, not just facts and figures, but emotional undertones, environmental details, historical contexts, and potential future implications. This information absorption happens largely unconsciously, which means even INFJs themselves often don't realize how much they're taking in. This constant processing can lead to unpredictable periods of overwhelm and withdrawal. An INFJ might seem perfectly fine in a social situation, engaging normally in conversation and appearing to enjoy themselves. But then they'll suddenly need to leave or become quiet and distant, seemingly without trigger. What's actually happening is that their internal processing system has hit capacity and needs time to sort through all the information they've absorbed. The overload doesn't just come from social situations either. INFJs can become overwhelmed by news cycles, work environments, or even entertainment media that others consume without thinking. They might avoid certain movies because the emotional content is too intense, or need to take breaks from social media because they're absorbing too much secondhand stress and anxiety. This sensitivity to information overload makes INFJs incredibly unpredictable in their availability and energy levels. They might be the life of the party one weekend and completely antisocial the next, not because their feelings toward people have changed, but because they need time to process all the information they've absorbed. 12. The values-driven decision-making that confuses everyone. Perhaps one of the most predictably unpredictable things about INFJs is how they make decisions. While most personality types have decision-making patterns that others can eventually figure out, INFJs base their choices on internal value systems that are often invisible to outside observers. An INFJ might turn down a high-paying job opportunity that seems perfect on paper because something about the company culture doesn't align with their values. They might end a relationship that looks great from the outside because they sense some fundamental incompatibility that others can't see. They might choose to pursue a creative project that seems impractical because it feeds their soul in a way that more sensible choices don't. These decisions often don't make sense to friends, family, or colleagues who are looking at external factors like salary, status, or conventional measures of success. But INFJs are operating from a complex internal framework that weighs factors like authenticity, meaning, potential for growth, and alignment with their vision for their future self. The unpredictable part is that these internal values aren't always consistent or clearly articulated, even to the INFJ themselves. They might make a choice that seems to contradict a previous decision, leaving others confused about what they actually want or value. The truth is that INFJs are constantly evolving their understanding of themselves and their values, which means their decision-making criteria can shift in subtle but significant ways. 13. The leadership style that nobody sees coming. When INFJs step into leadership roles, they often surprise everyone, including themselves, with their approach. They're not the obvious choice for leadership in most traditional sense. They're not the loudest voice in the room, they don't naturally seek attention or power, and they often prefer to work behind the scenes. But when they do lead, they bring a style that's completely different from what most people expect. INFJ leaders tend to focus on empowering others rather than commanding them. They'll spend time getting to know each team member individually, understanding their motivations, strengths, and concerns. Then they'll create environments where people can do their best work, often anticipating needs and removing obstacles before team members even realize they exist. This leadership style can be incredibly effective, but it's also completely unpredictable to people who are used to more traditional leadership approaches. An INFJ leader might make decisions that seem counterintuitive, like giving a struggling team member more responsibility instead of less, or completely restructuring a project based on insights that they can't fully articulate. They also tend to lead by example rather than explicit direction, which can leave team members wondering exactly what they're supposed to be doing. An INFJ might demonstrate the kind of work quality or interpersonal approach they want to see, expecting others to pick up on these subtle cues rather than spelling everything out explicitly. Conclusion: embracing the unpredictable nature of INFJs. So there you have it, 13 different ways that INFJs embody the black swan phenomenon in human behavior. They're rare, they're unpredictable, and once you truly understand them, they'll change how you see personality and human nature entirely. The key to appreciating INFJs isn't trying to control or predict them, it's learning to embrace their unpredictability as a feature, not a bug. These are the people who will surprise you with insights you never saw coming, support you in ways you didn't know you needed, and challenge your assumptions about how people should behave. If you're an INFJ watching this, I hope you feel seen and understood. Your unpredictability isn't a flaw, it's part of what makes you uniquely valuable in this world. You don't need to fit into neat categories or behave in ways that make others comfortable. Your job is to be authentically yourself, even when that means being a beautiful, confusing, inspiring black swan. And if you're not an INFJ but you have them in your life, remember this: their unpredictability comes from depth, not inconsistency. They're not trying to be difficult or confusing, they're just operating from a rich internal world that processes information differently than most. Give them space to be who they are, and you'll be rewarded with relationships that are deeper and more meaningful than you ever thought possible. The world needs its black swans, those rare, unpredictable individuals who challenge our assumptions and show us new ways of being human. INFJs are living proof that the most interesting people are often the ones who can't be easily categorized or controlled. And honestly, isn't that exactly the kind of mystery that makes life worth living? Remember, you can't control a black swan, you can only appreciate the beauty and rarity of encountering one. And if you're lucky enough to have INFJs in your life, consider yourself blessed to witness some of the most fascinating examples of human complexity in action.